Hey guys, I'm Dave. This is Let's Click Photography, and today we are straight into Lightroom following some recent videos where we've been discussing depth of field and where to focus, average sharpness, hyperfocal distance and all that kind of jazz. I thought it was about time we took a look at sharpening in post-production. I've got this lovely image here. On the left we've got without any sharpening applied whatsoever. On the right, after sharpening. So I'm going to talk about how we get from the left to the right, and then how to carry that sharpness across for when we post onto social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook. What sharpening is in post-production is actually adding contrast, because sharpening is in itself contrast. Of course, the contrast slider in our basic panel in Lightroom adds itself some sharpening, and the contrast tool is like a roller brush. Covers everything. You can see there, put it up to 100, everything goes up to 100. Pull it down, everything loses contrast. And on the contrast, I'm going to take that up to a level of 30. And that's going to apply to the whole image because we're using that roller brush. Now we've roller brushed, so the next thing that we're going to do is our clarity slider down here in our presence module. Clarity is like putting away the roller brush and getting out the largest just hand brush that we've got. You see, what clarity does is it adds contrast at slightly more defined points than the contrast slider. So you get a little bit more refinement with it, but it's still quite large areas, and it also includes edges in it as well. Restraint really is necessary with clarity because it can make your image like this one here look a little bit odd and a little bit garish, especially if you were then applying other points of sharpening. So I'm going to take this down to -8. Now, what you'll notice as we go through the different modules in this tutorial is that I'm going to counterbalance that in the next step. Our texture is like the next brush down. Our texture slider deals with the area inside of an object and doesn't apply edge sharpening. So the texture on this rock, for instance, if we bring that up, we'll see that increase, and we will see it decrease the texture on top of the rock, but it doesn't so much affect the edges, which is why you can see the edges still. And I'm just going to pop that up to 7. Now, with all of the tools that we're using here in our basics panel, that is being applied to the entire image, and that is the first stage of our sharpening, and we're ready to move on to step 2. Now, step 2 is move down to our detail panel here and our sharpening sliders. We're going to sharpen this image with the background in mind, so these areas around here. And if we take our sharpening up to 150 all the way, when Lightroom catches up, we're going to see that that sharpens the background. But you might also be able to see that there are some artifacts in that, some speckled spots. Yep, it looks sharp, but it doesn't look great. And if we look into our sky, you can see loads of dots. And if you want to see that even more, if you press Alt or Option on your keyboard, you'll turn this into a reset sharpening. And when you click a slider, you'll get a grayscale come up, and that can help you to visualize things within your image. So if I do that on mask and just whip our mask up slightly, now all of the white bits in there are being sharpened, and that includes the noise that's in there as well. But before we get to our masking, we're just going to deal with the next couple of sliders down, which are our radius tool and our details tool. Now back to our painting analogy, the sharpening brush is a fine brush, and what this affects is the edges, and the radius slider tells us how many pixels that is going to affect. So if I use my Alt Option button and click that radius slider, we'll get a grayscale over, and you can see what it is that we're going to be affecting. So if I push that up quite a lot, you're going to see that we've got this line around the outside here that's come into play. If I pull that down, we will find that that diminishes, and all the lines are a lot less thick. And this refers to pixels, so it's doing sharpening here at 0.5 pixel wide, and it's doing sharpening here at 3 pixels. So the sharpening is affecting 3 pixels around the edges. I'm actually quite happy with just sharpening at a 1 pixel level. Next up then we've got details. So the detail refers to how much sharpening is being done. And again, if I press Alt or Option and slide that, we're going to see if we can take that down here. It's going to, more grey is going to come into play, and we can only see the outline of quite major things, so like the people there, the tree. And if I throw that all the way up to 100, we're going to start to see the outlines of leaves, and we're going to start to see the outline of specific pixels. In this case, if you look, I'll put the grey on, into this area here, you'll be able to see the noise being revealed, and that's because we're now sharpening noise that is hiding within the shadows. And we don't want to do that. So holding on to that key, I'm going to take that to 100 as we've got, and then I'm going to start to pull it down until I can seal any pixels that I don't want to be sharpening. So now we're only really affecting some of the thicker outlines around some of the areas in the back. Now we can set our actual sharpening, and I don't want to be at 150. 64 is going to give me the effect that I want there. And that brings us then onto our last slider, which is masking. And masking means that you can conceal the sharpening from some of the areas of your image that you don't want it to be seen in. So a good example of this will be in the sky. I don't need to sharpen the sky, especially dust spots like that, which I'll deal with later. So I'm going to conceal those clouds. I'm going to mask those clouds. I'm going to do that by pressing Alt or Option. And when I hit the slider, white will show up, and that I'm now going to create a mask. White reveals, black conceals. And as I start to drag that up, the black that comes in is concealing in that area. I'm not looking to completely remove it, but I want all of the tiny bits. There we go. I think that would do. And I am happy with sharpening, and we're ready to move on to stage 3. Now, stage 3 of sharpening is all about the things that actually matter. In this image, that would be our boat out here and our rocks down here. And now, to save a bit of time, I've already created the masks. I've took the contrast to 10 to give them a little bit more pop with the contrast. If you remember, we took the clarity slider down to -8 right at the beginning when we're covering our whole image. Now on these, I'm going to bring that up to +8, and that reverses that -8. So that -8 clarity exists in the rest of the image, but now we are at 0. We've reversed that using this mask here. I've also added extra texture, which isn't around the edging. I've also generated some sharpness to level 12 to balance that and get that sharpness on the edges to match that extra texture. So I'm happy with these rocks at the front. They look nice and sharp, and they've got plenty of clarity and texture on there. I'm happy with the background, and everything's looking nice there, so I'm happy with that. So the last bit is I'm just going to add a little bit extra to this boat, because that was quite a bit further away than these rocks. There was some haze around that morning, so I'm just going to add another mask, and I'm just going to do the same thing again now with that. I'm going to double the amount of contrast because we added 10 on our mask with the rocks. Now I'm adding a further 10 just to the boat. Doubled that texture. So I've added another 12. I've added some clarity. So if you remember, we balanced our clarity out. So now on the boat, I'm actually adding, for the first time now, some clarity into the boat. I'm also bringing the sharpness up on the boat as well. If you look in and around the top here, which was covered in a little bit of haze, take the mask off, and you should spot a little bit of change there. You can see that bit of change, that bit of haze come in. And so by popping that on, I take that away and add some nice sharpening to those areas there. On to the last bit. And the last bit is, of course, output sharpening. Now, what this does is it adds an amount of sharpening again to the overall image. Now, we've just worked on sharpening. We've sharpened the entire image. We've sharpened detailed parts of the image. We've done 3 points of sharpening on our image. And if I'm going to export this at a full size, you can see that I don't use any sharpening at all, because the sharpening that I've done on the image already is plenty. If I'm going to put this, let's say, onto Instagram, you can see a few things that have taken place. First of all, I'm compressing the quality to 75%. I am resizing the image. So this is a 26 million pixel image. I'm resizing it to be on the long edge 1080 pixels wide. Why am I doing that? Well, because if I upload this image at full res to Instagram, Instagram is going to compress it for me, and it does a terrible job of it, and that's why we lose sharpness when we upload to social media. By doing this way, by resizing here, Instagram works on phone screens on the long edge for a horizontal image like this. This is this edge here. Well, the width of the phone screen on Instagram is 1080 pixels, so that's what it needs to be exported as. And by doing it here in the export stage, it means that Instagram won't do it for me and won't compress the image at all after I upload it. So I've resized that to fit a long edge of 1080 pixels. So I've dropped the quality, I've dropped the pixel count of the image, so that's a heavily compressed image. So therefore I want to add sharpening, because when I drop the quality and compress the image, I also compress the sharpening. I also lose sharpness by doing that, and so this counters it. So I'm going to sharpen this for the screen algorithm, because that's what it's going to be going on, onto a screen, and I'm going to add a high amount of sharpening. If I was going, let's say, for a bigger image, let's say onto my website, where I'm putting the quality at 100% and I am exporting that with a larger amount of pixels, then I decrease the amount from high to standard. And also, it is important to know that you cannot sharpen an image that wasn't took well in the first place, and that's why this video on screen is going to get you to that point, especially if you do landscape photography, and it's going to tell you exactly where to focus and how to work out your focus points. I've been Dave, this has been Let's Click Photography, and I'll see you on that one pretty soon. Bye.